My name is Jatin Kotecha. I live in Melbourne and I decided to go on the Grand Australian ride. The route I decided to take was A1 or Highway 1. A1 or Highway 1 or A1 is actually a combination of roads that make the whole route. It goes through the full circumference of Australia and also covers a good portion of Tasmania as well. The road would be taking me to all the states and capitals. I would be riding more than 16,000 kilometers in the whole trip. Originally I had planned for 15,000 plus, but I ended up doing more than 16,000 kilometers. Per day I would be riding anywhere between 300 and 600 kilometers. On an average I was riding around 400 kilometers. Now the shortest day was around 200 and the longest was 650. In terms of time, I would say I would be riding between 5 to 12 hours per day. So it was pretty much a working day when I was riding. A lot of people have been asking me, why do this? Why go for this ride? And my first answer is, why not? The real answer is, I love riding motorcycles. And this is one of the best rides I can think of. In fact, I would say if anyone loves riding motorcycles, this is a trip no one should miss. It's beautiful. All kinds of terrains, weather, everything you can think of is thrown at you. It's a full experience of riding. While taking on the adventure or while taking on the challenge, I thought, why not support a good cause as well? So I thought of supporting Save Soil. Now, Save Soil is something, the whole campaign is something that I really believe in, and I think it was a perfect fit for me as well. So I full-heartedly supported and did everything I could during the ride. I spoke to a lot of people. I distributed information. I also applied the stickers wherever I was allowed to, but in various places, including Nullarbor Plains to the line of Capricorn, everywhere. So I was carrying the message throughout my journey, and I had a ton of discussions with a lot of people about why we should save soil. Australia is a country of extremes. Weather-wise, I faced practically everything. I've had full day of rain, non-stop for 8 hours, and I was completely soaked to the skin. I have had extreme heat where I sometimes thought I would just fall because of that heat. I have had extreme humidity and I just got completely exhausted, and face extreme cold where my hands I nearly had hypothermia on my hands. They turned blue because I was riding and it was so cold and it's freezing sub-zero freezing temperature. And there was also black ice on the road around Tasmania and snow in places. So one trip and all of this, I think it's hard to find, but it was beautiful. It was an amazing experience. Australia is full of interesting places and a variety of them. And there are so many places and so many things that I've seen. Just to name a few, the Great Ocean Road, Nullarbor Plains, Australian Bight, Indian Ocean Way, Pinnacle Desert, 90 Mile Straight Road, Pilbara region, termite moles, Aboriginal culture and heritage, Kimberley region, big things like banana, big mango, big potato, etc. Beautiful twisted roads, lakes, farms, rainforest, desert, plains, massive beaches, rolling hills, and so much more. So if I were to pick my favorite, it's really hard to do that, but I would say some of the best memories I have or experiences I have is with the Nullarbor Plains, which is like a treeless plain going for kilometers on end, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers on end. The Great Australian Bight, it's like a cliff but which goes on for kilometers. I would say exploring those termite moles. The first time I saw them, they're like huge. Some of them are very huge, some of them are tiny. And I was totally amazed looking at it. But then turns out that north half of Australia is full of them. Then like Pinnacle Desert was totally amazing. Pilbara, it's like being in Mars. It's so different. Then the Kimberley region was entirely amazing. And then so many twisted roads, and the whole experience of riding on mountains and rolling hills all over the place, particularly around the east coast around Cairns, was just amazing. The planning and preparation for the trip took about 8 to 10 months. I had to decide and prepare the bike, the luggage system that I will be having, the things that I should carry, the things I should not carry, prepare for emergencies like tire punctures or something going wrong, what parts I can carry to overcome those situations, because this is a solo trip that I was doing. So I wanted to make sure that I'm capable of taking care of all kind of situations. And I knew from the start that I will be in places where there won't be anyone around me for hundreds of kilometers. So I had to make sure that I am prepared for that. Most important thing was the weather element, because Australia, as I've mentioned, is the world of extremes. I had to find the optimum time during the whole year where I can actually do this trip in one go. And there is only one time in the whole year where you can do it, and that's in the month of May. So I started end of April, 30th of April, that's when I started. And when I finished, it was around mid-June. So by that time, I had covered most of Australia by end of May anyways. Another question that people asked me was, before I was going or while I was riding, it was like, are you doing it clockwise or are you doing it anti-clockwise? Now, it might not sound like a big question, but it is when doing Australia. A lot of people prefer to do it anti-clockwise because you get tailwind, so you get pushed. And that's a big factor for a lot of people. But for me, it was more about the route I would be taking, because I started from Melbourne and I knew that the route around all the way up to Perth would be a more comfortable route rather than going the other way around. So I decided to do clockwise, and I'm happy with it. And I will highly recommend to anyone to do clockwise, because wind was not a problem for me at least when I was riding. Maybe in caravans it would be, but for me it wasn't. Choosing the bike was one of the most important decisions I had to make. I decided to go for Royal Enfield Himalayan. Many reasons. Primary was obviously Royal Enfield. Being born and growing up in India, it was close to my heart. So that was a fairly easy tick. Beyond that, other factors that actually increase my appeal towards Royal Enfield Himalayan. The engine is not too small and not too big. It's just the right size. So it gives a good fuel mileage. It performs well. It's a very tough bike. Taken the bike through several different conditions and terrains, and it never gave me any hard time. I've never had any issues with the bike whatsoever. It's a simple bike, but it's a very good performer. I call the bike Masti, and believe it or not, there are times when I used to talk with my Masti. I guess that happens with anyone. Going for such a long ride when it was just me and my Masti. So, but the best part was, the performance of the bike, and the mileage it gave was really good. And for a trip like this, I would highly recommend going for Royal Enfield Himalayan. It's a smaller bike as compared to many other bikes that anyone doing this trip would see along the way, because whoever is riding on this route will take a much bigger bike. People are afraid to take a bike like this one because they think the engine is a bit smaller. But I would actually say the other way, because I think it actually did perform well, and because it's a simpler bike, it didn't have any electronic issues or anything of that kind. So I think it's a very good performer and one of the best bikes you could take on this particular ride. When deciding the baggage system, I had to choose between going for hard panniers or to go for soft panniers or other baggage systems. The big question is what happens when the bike falls. You have to assume your bike will fall and start from there. So if I had gone for, I eventually went for Moscow Motors Reckless 80. It is definitely not panniers or soft panniers. The reason being, when your bike falls, number one, my legs will be safe because the soft baggage would actually work like cushion. Number two, it's the bag system will not be damaged because it's a pretty tough baggage system. And number three, it will be light. The panniers are a little heavy, so I decided to go for this one. One of the key reasons was it's light. When deciding what things to carry, it comes from my background of traveling and hiking. I have always been, we travel a lot and I love to hike. So I have gone through, done through hikes for multiple days and things like that. So I kind of had an idea from the start. But things that I did decide to carry with me, number one was camping gear. Because when traveling in Australia, if something happens and you have to stop at one point, you need shelter. So I had to carry tent, camping gear including tent, sleeping bag, mattress, things like that. I also carried cooking utensils and basically all the equipment I need to cook, and also some food. So this is one thing that I did carry. Second was carrying spare parts. If something went wrong and if I can't find the parts I need for the bike, so I had to carry some essential parts that would basically help me get out of that situation and to a place where I could get it serviced or replaced or whatever. And riding Royal Enfield Himalayan, the good thing is there is services all over Australia and the parts are available quite easily. The next thing was tools. I had to work out the set of tools that I will be carrying. Plus there were things like I had to have a jack in case the battery went flat, compressor, when extra tubes, tube repair kit, and the list goes on. So there's quite a few things that I carried, even camera gear, clothes. So what I've done is I've actually compiled a list and put it on my website grandexped.com to share it with anyone who wants to know what I actually carried with me. The trip for me was quite unique and once in a lifetime thing. So I decided to try and capture as much as possible. In doing so, what I had, I was carrying two GoPros. There was one on the chin and the one on the handlebar. I was carrying a drone because I always say, to anyone I meet that you cannot see Australia from the ground only. You have to see it from the sky because it is so vast and everything is so huge. You have to see the perspective from there while you are on the ground. So I carried the drone to capture that, and obviously I was taking photographs. I decided to do some vlogging as well so that I can capture my experience and share my day-to-day experiences with people and also for my own memories. So that was one element, so that's why I had to make sure that I was carrying all the camera equipment. Because of this, I was also carrying a laptop. Now, because of all the camera gear, I didn't camp as far as possible. That was the idea, to not avoid camping, so that when I go to the motel, I can put everything for charge, do all the backups and everything, and I'll be done for the day. So, and I'll also be rested well. So, because of my approach towards carrying camera gears and capturing everything, I decided to stay in motels and not camp. Yes, accommodation or hotels or motels or camping or what happens at the end of the day. I decided to do avoid camping as much as possible. I didn't end up camping at all. I was carrying the gear, but I didn't use it. I stayed in motels throughout the journey, motels or Airbnb or hotels. But there were also challenges that came along the way. You see, because I was riding a motorcycle, I didn't know if there would be an issue, or if for whatever reason I have to stop on the way. So I couldn't book more than 3 days ahead. Now, there was one interesting thing that happened when I was in Darwin. There was an earthquake, and because of that, some mines were affected. And in the day after that day, in a couple of days, I was supposed to reach Mount Isa, and because of the earthquake, all the mines were emptied out, and the workers were actually accommodated in the town, Mount Isa. And that day I was riding 650 kilometers. So it was quite a challenge, because when I started the ride, I started very early in the morning because I knew it was a long day. As I was getting closer, I kind of didn't know where I was staying. And my wife Devangi was constantly helping me try and find some accommodation in Mount Isa. Everything was booked out, so the only option was that I would have to ride like 100-200 kilometers past Mount Isa and then stay there. It was already a very long day, so I really didn't want to do that. But luckily, what happened was, we did somehow manage to find one room, and it saved the day. But it was the longest ride I had done, and at the day, and in the same ride, I had the challenge of where I will be staying that night. So, but yeah, everything ended up well. Food is usually not a concern when you're traveling or when you're going on a bike ride or a tour like this. As it is, I was supporting the Save Soil campaign, so I made sure, I also decided that I will do the whole tour being vegetarian. Now, being vegetarian is generally not a problem. The vegetarian food is available everywhere. But when you are in the Australian outback, you're on the other side of the spectrum. So things can get a little tricky sometimes. Though vegetarian burger was my best friend at dinner times. But again, there were times when no vegetarian food will be available. So in that case, but again, when I used to stop and talk to people, and they used to ask me what am I doing, and when they find out I'm supporting this cause of Save Soil and everything, a lot of people, went out of their way to support me. Even places where there was no vegetarian food, they somehow managed to make something up for me. So I would say, when it comes to food, my story is also about people and the way they supported me in this trip. A trip like this, 50 days, 16,500 kilometers, cannot go without challenges. So yes, there were challenges, quite a few of them. Like for example, I had never rode more than 300 kilometers in a week. But over here, my first day was more than 200, and the day after I was again riding, and again and again. It was going to go on for 50 days, I was going to ride. So physically, I had never experienced this before. So this was the first time. So that was one challenge. Second, when riding, I had a lot of back pains at times, shoulder pains, but then I used to do yoga in the morning, and that helped me overcome that. A lot of other things like whirlwind effect, because I wasn't staying in one place more than one day. So I was like in motels, from one motel to the other every day. And that did cause a bit of whirlwind, where you wake up in the morning, you're like, where am I? So that was one. And there were other things as well, like for example, staying away from the family, friends. There were times when you are in the middle of nowhere, and you are like, what if something goes wrong? So there is always that little fear inside you that, okay, if something goes wrong, something were to happen, there is no one there. So And there's so many other things that happen along the way. Finding food, running out of fuel, running out of water. Running out of water might not sound big, but believe me, when you're in Australian outback, there is no water. So there is no fuel. There are two things that the most important out there. And I had run out of both at times, but luckily I was carrying extra fuel, so I could use that. But there were times when I was so close to running out completely out of fuel, but luckily I just reached to the petrol pump on time. So there has been several different challenges along the way, but all in all, what I would say is two things. One, it's the challenges that make it what it is. The whole experience is built because of the challenges that you will face. And the second thing, what I really believe in is, if you believe in something, everything else will fall in place to make it happen. So there you go. I would highly recommend anyone and everyone to do what I just experienced. This is definitely not the end. I started a personal project called Exped. It was to push me outside my comfort zone. So this project has just given me that extra boost that I needed for the ones that's going to come in the future. So yeah, this is the start, I would say, to a very interesting journey and very exciting journey that I'm definitely looking forward to, and I would love to share it with everyone as well.